The sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving streaks of orange fading into purple across the sky. Emily drove through the almost empty grocery store parking lot. Her hands steady on the steering wheel, but her heart heavy with unspoken thoughts. The car's headlights cut across rows of parked vehicles, but the lot was unusually quiet for a Friday evening. It gave the space an empty, echoing feel, as if the world itself was pausing in the back seat. Daniel sat quietly with his seatbelt snug across his chest, his small hands holding onto a paper bag filled with snacks. He was only 10, but there was something different about his silence that evening. Normally, he chattered on about school, his soccer team, or the funny things his classmates said. But tonight, he didn't say much. He stared out the window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one as the night settled in. Emily noticed, of course. She always noticed. As his mother, she had learned to read every shift in his mood, the little pauses in his words. The way his shoulders drooped when something bothered him, or the bright sparkle in his eyes when he was excited. But this time, she wasn't sure if it was Daniel who was lost in thought, or herself. Her mind drifted, as it often did these days, to the life she had built after the divorce. 2 years had passed since her marriage ended, but the ache lingered in quiet ways. She had done everything possible to keep things steady for Daniel. She kept her job at the local office, handled bills, packed lunches, and showed up at every soccer practice and school meeting. Outwardly, she was holding it all together. Inwardly, though, there were nights when the loneliness pressed in so strongly it almost felt like another presence in the room. She tried not to think about it too much. Love, romance, companionship, those were luxuries she no longer allowed herself to hope for. Her heart was bruised enough from the past, and she told herself that right now her only focus should be on Daniel. That was what mattered most. That was what kept her moving forward. But there were moments she couldn't ignore, like when she caught herself smiling at something small, or when she saw other families laughing together at the park, or when a simple kind gesture made her chest tighten with longing. Those fleeting reminders told her that deep down, part of her was still waiting for something she didn't even know how to name. The car rolled to a slow stop as she turned into a space near the far end of the lot. She preferred parking away from the crowd. It made unloading groceries easier and gave her a little more breathing room. The lot was quiet, except for the hum of a few engines in the distance and the faint sound of a shopping cart being wheeled away by an employee. As she shifted, thinned to park, and reached for her purse, she felt Daniel lean forward from the back seat. His voice was so soft at first that she almost thought she imagined it. "Mom," he whispered. Emily paused, her hand still on the strap of her bag. Something about the way he said it, gentle, careful, almost secretive, made her turn toward him. "Yes, sweetheart." Daniel hesitated, his eyes focused on her with an intensity she wasn't used to seeing. "I saw the way you looked at Mr. Carter today." The words landed in the air like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples across Emily's chest. She froze, her fingers tightening around the strap. For a moment, she wasn't even sure how to react. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, caught between shock and disbelief. Her son's innocent statement carried more weight than he could possibly realize. That afternoon at soccer practice, she had stood on the sidelines like she always did, watching Daniel run across the field. She had clapped and cheered, smiling when he scored a goal. But at one point, her eyes had drifted to the man giving directions, with calm authority, the man who always spoke with patience, never raising his voice, never making anyone feel small. Michael Carter. Emily hadn't meant for anyone to notice, especially not her son. She thought her glance had been subtle, hidden beneath the cover of a parent's natural attention toward a coach. But Daniel was observant. He always had been. Her heart thudded now as she tried to think of what to say. She didn't want to encourage him, but she also couldn't deny what he had seen. She had noticed Michael more than once. She had noticed his kind smile, the way he carried himself, the gentle way he spoke to the kids, even the quiet respect he showed to parents. But admitting that to her son? No, that was too complicated, Daniel. She began carefully, her voice low. "What do you mean?" He looked at her with a seriousness that made him seem older than 10. You looked happy, happier than I've seen you in a while. You were smiling more. And when he talked to you, you looked at him like he was important. Emily's chest tightened. She wanted to laugh it off, brush it aside, maybe say something like, "Oh, honey, you're imagining things," but she couldn't. Not when his words carried such an innocent truth. Her son wasn't accusing. He wasn't teasing. He was simply noticing, speaking out loud the quiet things she had been trying to hide from herself. The parking lot lights flickered above them, buzzing faintly in the cool evening air. Emily's reflection in the windshield looked pale, caught between surprise and something she didn't want to name. She realized then that it wasn't just her who felt the silence at home. The absence of laughter, the missing piece that once belonged in their family. Daniel felt it too. And maybe, just maybe, he wanted her to find something or someone that could bring that light back. Her lips parted, but no words came. She turned away, her gaze drifting to the glowing street lamps as her heart pounded harder. In the stillness of the car, her son's whisper seemed to echo louder and louder. Emily knew in that moment that her life had shifted in a subtle but undeniable way. Emily sat frozen in the quiet of the car, Daniel's words hanging in the air like a secret she wasn't ready to hear. You looked happy. Maybe you like him. Her son had spoken them so simply, but to her they felt heavy, almost too real. She gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady her racing thoughts. Her mind pulled back to earlier that day. The soccer field where everything had seemed so ordinary. Parents scattered along the sidelines, chatting with each other, cheering for their kids. The smell of freshly cut grass lingered in the air, and Daniel had been running hard, determined to score. Emily had clapped and shouted encouragement, but then her eyes had drifted. Not on purpose, not out of choice. They had landed on him, Michael Carter. Coach Carter. As most parents called him, though his first name often slipped quietly into Emily's mind when she thought of him later. He stood on the edge of the field, tall, steady, his voice calm as he directed the kids. There was something about the way he carried himself that always drew her attention. He didn't just bark orders like some coaches did. He encouraged, he explained, he guided. When a child made a mistake, he didn't scold, he smiled, reassured them, and showed them how to try again. There was a strength about him, but also a gentleness. It was rare, and every time Emily noticed it, something inside her stirred. She hated admitting it, even to herself. But the truth was there. She liked being around him. Still, she had kept those feelings buried. It was safer that way. He was a widower, she knew that much. His wife had passed away years earlier, leaving him to raise his teenage daughter alone. Emily sometimes caught glimpses of the girl when she came to practice, sitting quietly with headphones in or helping her father carry equipment. They seemed close, and Emily respected that. But part of her always wondered what must it feel like to lose someone you loved so deeply. Did he ever feel as lonely as she did? Now, hearing Daniel whisper the truth she had hidden, her chest tightened. Her son was perceptive, but she never imagined he would pick up on something like this. She wanted to protect him, keep things simple. Keep her heart locked away so he wouldn't see how fragile it still was. "Sweetheart," Emily said softly, turning in her seat to face him, "sometimes you imagine things that aren't there." Daniel shook his head. "No, Mom. I know what I saw." His voice wasn't playful or teasing. It was steady, certain. You smiled at him in a way you don't smile at anyone else. The words stung because they were true. She had smiled at Michael differently. She couldn't deny it. But what unsettled her most wasn't that Daniel noticed it, was that she hadn't realized how deeply her own feelings were showing. Emily leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. She tried to summon her usual calm, the armor she had worn since the divorce. She told herself this was foolish. Michael was just Daniel's coach. That was all. She was reading too much into small gestures, into moments that probably meant nothing to him. Why risk embarrassing herself or worse, giving Daniel false hope for something that wasn't real? but a quiet voice inside her whispered that maybe it was real. She thought of the times Michael lingered after practice, making small talk with her about Daniel's progress, his schoolwork, or even her job. His tone was always kind, never rushed. Sometimes she caught him looking at her with a softness in his eyes, like he was searching for something unspoken. She had always brushed it aside, afraid of overthinking, but now she wondered, had he noticed her too? "Mom," Daniel's voice broke into her thoughts again, gentle but insistent. "You don't have to be alone forever, you know?" The simplicity of his words nearly undid her. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, though she blinked them back quickly, not wanting him to see. He was only a child, yet somehow he understood more than she wanted him to. He had lived through the silence in their home, the empty dinners at the table, the quiet nights when Emily stayed up late working because she didn't know what else to do. Maybe he longed for laughter as much as she did. "I'm fine." "Daniel," she said softly, though her voice cracked just slightly. "I have you. That's all I need." But Daniel shook his head again. "I just want you to be happy." The parking lot seemed to grow colder in that moment, the streetlights buzzing faintly above as if echoing the tension between them. Emily wanted to reach back, hold his hand, reassure him that everything would be okay. But her own heart was in turmoil. She thought of how complicated things could become. What if she allowed herself to feel something for Michael? What if Daniel got attached only for it to end in disappointment? What if she risked opening her heart and it broke again? She couldn't bear the thought of hurting her son that way. And yet, the way Daniel spoke with such hope and honesty made her wonder if maybe he saw something she was too afraid to admit. The silence stretched between them, heavy but fragile. Emily turned the key slightly, the soft hum of the engine filling the space. She didn't answer her son directly, not yet. She wasn't ready. But inside her, something had shifted. His whisper had forced her to look at feelings she had buried, feelings that refused to stay hidden any longer, for the first time in years. Emily realized she couldn't ignore the possibility of love, not because she was searching for it, but because it had quietly found its way into her life through small smiles, gentle conversations, and the steady presence of a man she barely allowed herself to dream about. She pressed her lips together, her hands tight on the steering wheel. She told herself to focus, to drive home, to end the conversation. But Daniel's words lingered, echoing louder than the engine, louder than her fears. "You looked happy, Mom." Happiness. It had been so long since she allowed herself to feel it fully. And now, with just a whisper. Her son had reminded her of what she had been missing, of what her heart might still be longing for. The silence inside the car felt heavy, filled with Daniel's whisper that still rang in Emily's mind. She gripped the steering wheel, uncertain of what to say next, when suddenly the glow of headlights swept across the lot. A car turned in and parked just 2 spaces away. The sharp beam made her squint, and before she even fully recognized the figure stepping out, her heart already knew. Michael Carter. He carried a brown grocery bag in one arm, balancing it against his side with casual ease. The faint sound of his car door closing seemed to echo louder than it should, as if the quiet night had been waiting for him. He spotted them almost instantly, and the warm smile that spread across his face sent Emily's heart stumbling in her chest. "Emily," he called out gently, his voice carrying across the still lot. "Daniel." What a surprise. Daniel's grin was immediate, wide and mischievous. "Hi, Coach," he said, leaning forward in his seat as though this were the best coincidence in the world. Emily fumbled, trying to calm her racing pulse. She forced a polite smile, pushing down the nervous energy bubbling inside her. "Good evening, Michael," she said, her tone steadier than she felt. "Long day." He shifted the bag in his arm and nodded. "Always," he admitted, his voice calm and kind, but better now. His eyes lingered on hers just a second longer than usual, and that brief look made her throat tighten. It wasn't flirtation, not exactly it, was something gentler. A connection she couldn't quite name, but felt deep in her chest. Daniel leaned back, clearly entertained by the moment. His earlier whisper now hovered between them, unspoken but alive. He didn't have to say anything else. His knowing look said it all. Michael stepped closer, setting the grocery bag on the hood of his car for a moment. He was dressed simple jeans, a gray shirt. Nothing remarkable, and yet Emily couldn't stop noticing the details. The way the lines around his eyes deepened when he smiled, the way his movements seemed unhurried, the way his presence filled the quiet without overwhelming it. "How's school going, Daniel?" Michael asked, turning his attention to the boy. Daniel shrugged, grinning. "It's fine. Homework's boring, though." "Soccer's better." Michael laughed softly, shaking his head. "That's because you put all your energy into the field. But keep it the homework. Trust me'll matter later." His voice carried the steady patience that Emily had always admired, the kind that made kids feel respected rather than lectured. Emily watched the exchange. Her heart caught somewhere between pride and longing. She had always wanted Daniel to have strong role models, people who would show him kindness and strength. And here was Michael unintentionally stepping into that space with such ease it almost scared her. Their eyes met again. And this time Emily couldn't look away fast enough. Something unspoken passed between them, a quiet acknowledgement that went deeper than casual conversation. "Do you need help with those groceries?" she asked quickly, her voice coming out softer than intended. Michael glanced at the bag, then back at her. "I've got it, but thank you. You've already had a long day, I'm sure." His tone held a hint of something else, something almost personal. As if he cared about more than just being polite, Emily felt warmth creep into her cheeks, and she silently cursed herself for blushing so easily. She reminded herself that this was just a chance meeting in a parking lot, nothing more. And yet, the air between them felt charged, alive with possibilities she hadn't dared imagine. Daniel broke the moment with a playful grin. "Mom was just saying nice things about you, Coach." Emily's eyes widened, and she quickly turned to her son, giving him a look that begged for mercy. But Daniel only smiled wider, clearly enjoying his role in pushing something forward. Michael raised his brows slightly, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "Oh," he asked lightly, his gaze sliding back to Emily. "That's kind of her." Emily scrambled for words, her heart pounding. "Daniel exaggerates," she managed, forcing a laugh. "We were just talking about practice, that's all." But even as she said it, she knew it sounded thin. Michael didn't press, though. He simply gave a small, knowing smile, one that made her wonder if he had heard the truth hidden beneath her deflection. The night air was cool, but Emily felt warmer with each passing second. Every small gesture, every glance, every word exchanged seemed to pull her further into a space she had kept locked away for so long. And it wasn't just about her anymore. Daniel's eager expression told her he wanted this conversation to continue, wanted her to open up to something new. She told herself it was too soon, too complicated. But deep down, she couldn't ignore the flicker of hope growing inside her. Michael picked up his bag again, adjusting it against his arm. "Well, I should probably get these home before my daughter raids the kitchen for snacks," he said with a smile. Emily nodded, her lips parting as if to respond, but the words caught in her throat. She didn't want the moment to end. Not yet. Daniel leaned forward again, his voice bright. "Maybe we'll see you tomorrow, Coach." Michael's gaze returned to Emily, and for a heartbeat longer than necessary, he held it. "I hope so," he said softly, before turning toward his car. Emily watched him go, her chest tight, her thoughts racing. It was such a small encounter, such an ordinary thing, a coach, a parent, a child in a parking lot. And yet it felt anything but ordinary. It felt like the beginning of something as Michael drove away. Emily sat quietly, staring at the space where his car had been. Daniel shifted in the back seat, and when she glanced at him, his smile told her everything. He knew. He understood before she did, for the first time in a long while. Emily felt the fragile spark of possibility flicker in her heart, and it terrified her just as much as it thrilled her. The hum of Michael's engine faded as he pulled out of the parking lot, leaving behind a silence that felt strangely alive. Emily stayed still, her hands resting on the steering wheel, her thoughts tumbling in every direction. She didn't want to move, not yet. That short conversation, ordinary to anyone else, felt like it had opened something inside her. She couldn't explain it. But she knew things weren't the same as they had been just minutes before. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes sparkling with the kind of knowing mischief only a child could have. "Mom," he said softly, "he likes you too." Emily turned quickly, her heart skipping. "Daniel," she said, her voice half scolding, half pleading. "Don't start making up stories." But Daniel shook his head, smiling as if he had discovered a secret no one else could deny. "I could tell. The way he looked at you, it wasn't just normal. He smiled at you the same way you smiled at him." "I'm not wrong, Mom." His words made her pulse quicken. She wanted to argue, to remind him that grown-up relationships were complicated. That nothing was as simple as a smile in a parking lot. But she couldn't forget the look in Michael's eyes, the warmth in his voice. The way he lingered just a little longer than he needed to. Emily sat back in her seat, her chest tight. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memory of Michael's voice replay in her head. "I hope so." That's what he had said when Daniel asked about seeing him again. Two small words, yet they echoed with meaning. When she finally opened her eyes, Daniel was still watching her. He didn't tease. He didn't push. He simply waited, his small face serious in the glow of the dashboard light. "You don't have to be afraid," he whispered. Almost like he was offering her permission to feel something she'd locked away for too long. Emily's throat tightened. She reached back, brushing a hand across his hair, grateful and overwhelmed all at once. "You're too smart for your own good," she murmured. Though her voice shook, the drive home was quiet, but not the heavy silence from before. It felt different now, lighter somehow, filled with unspoken hope. Emily tried to push the thoughts away, to focus on the road, the houses, the familiar streets. But every turn seemed to carry her deeper into the truth her son had already seen. Her heart wanted something more. At home. She helped Daniel with his snack, tucked him into bed, and kissed his forehead goodnight. He drifted to sleep quickly, his small body curled beneath the blanket, the innocence of his words still lingering in the room. Emily stood there for a while, watching him breathe, realizing how much he understood about her without her ever having to explain. Later, in the stillness of her own room, Emily sat by the window with a cup of tea, staring out at the quiet street. Her mind replayed every detail of the evening, the whisper in the car, the unexpected meeting in the parking lot, the gentle look in Michael's eyes. For years, she had lived as though her heart was sealed off, untouchable. But tonight, something had shifted. She thought of Michael's life. The challenges he must have faced raising his daughter alone, the way he still carried himself with such calm strength. She wondered if he ever sat at his own window at night thinking of the past, wondering about the future. Did he miss having someone to share the small moments with, the way she did? Did he ever long for laughter at the dinner table, for companionship in the quiet hours? The questions pressed against her, filling her chest with both fear and possibility. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid to wonder. The next morning came with the usual rush packing lunches, making sure Daniel had his homework, grabbing her work bag. Yet, even as she moved through the motions, the memory of last night lingered like a soft light in the back of her mind. At soccer practice later that week, Emily found herself arriving earlier than usual. She stood at the edge of the field watching Daniel run drills with his teammates. And there was Michael, his voice steady as he gave instructions, his smile easy as he encouraged each child. When his eyes found hers across the field, gave a small wave. Her heart fluttered in response. Emily raised her hand, returning the gesture. It was simple, nothing dramatic, but in that moment it felt like more than a wave. It felt like acknowledgement, like the beginning of something neither of them had dared to name. Daniel, running across the field, caught the exchange. His grin widened, and Emily shook her head at him, trying not to laugh. For the rest of practice, she stood quietly. letting the cool breeze brush against her skin, letting herself breathe a little easier than she had in years. That night, as she tucked Daniel into bed again, he looked at her with sleepy eyes and whispered, "I told you. Mom, he makes you smile different." Emily kissed his forehead and whispered back, "Good night, sweetheart." She didn't argue this time because deep down, she knew Daniel was right. Something inside her had shifted forever, and it had all begun in the quiet of a parking lot, with a whisper from her son that changed everything.